The dust of the trail hung thick in the air as Lucinda Miller stumbled into Graywater, a forgotten speck on the Arizona Territory map. May 1873 had been unseasonably hot, and the brutal sun had scorched her fair skin during 3 days of desperate travel. One hand clutched a worn leather bag containing everything she owned. The other instinctively touched the purple-black bruise blooming around her left eye. The small mining town's main street was little more than a dirt path lined with weathered buildings, but to Lucinda, it represented something she hadn't felt in years possibility. She paused outside the town's only saloon, the Rusty Nail, gathering what little courage remained after her escape from Tucson. The worn wooden steps creaked beneath her boots as she pushed through the batwing doors. Conversation halted. A dozen pairs of eyes turned to assess the newcomer, a woman alone, clearly injured, with nothing but exhaustion and determination visible on her face. "Water," she managed to say before her knees buckled. Strong arms caught her before she hit the floor. Through blurring vision, she glimpsed a weathered face framed by sandy brown hair and concerned gray eyes. "Someone get Doc Palmer," the man holding her called out, his voice low and steady. "Miss, can you hear me?" Lucinda tried to nod, but darkness claimed her before she could respond. When she regained consciousness, she was lying on a narrow bed in an unfamiliar room. Sunlight filtered through thin curtains, casting golden rectangles across rough-hewn floorboards. Her bag sat on a nearby chair, apparently untouched. "You're awake." The same deep voice from the saloon came from a corner of the room. Lucinda bolted upright, immediately regretting the sudden movement as pain lanced through her head. Instinctively, she reached for her bag. "Nobody's touched your things," the man said, rising from his chair. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in simple rancher's clothes, faded denim, a cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled to the elbows, and scuffed boots. "I'm Griffin Holt. This is my place above the livery stable." Her throat felt like sandpaper. "Why am I here?" Griffin poured water from a pitcher and offered it to her. "Doc Palmer said you needed rest more than medicine. Dehydration, exhaustion. The hotel's full with miners and the boarding house doesn't take, well, women who arrive alone." He kept a respectful distance. "I have this spare room I never use." Lucinda sipped the water, studying him over the rim of the cup. "Thank you, Mr. Holt." "Griffin," he corrected. His eyes flickered to her bruised face but didn't linger there. Instead, he nodded toward a covered tray on the bedside table. "There's some stew." "Nothing fancy, but it's hot." She hesitated, years of hard-learned caution making her wary of unexpected kindness. As if reading her thoughts, Griffin stepped back toward the door. "I'll be in the stable if you need anything. Take your time." He paused at the threshold, his expression serious. "Miss Miller, Lucinda Miller, Miss Miller, I don't know what brought you here or who gave you that bruise, but you're safe here. No one's touching you again, not while I'm around." The door closed softly behind him, leaving Lucinda alone with his promise hanging in the air. She hadn't believed in promises for a long time, but something in Griffin Holt's steady gaze made her want to try. After finishing the surprisingly good stew, Lucinda explored the small room. A basin of fresh water sat on a washstand beneath a spotted mirror. She winced at her reflection. The bruise was even worse than she'd imagined, yellow at the edges and deepening to purple-black near her eye. Her honey-blonde hair hung in tangled waves around her shoulders. 3 days on the run had left their mark. The door wasn't locked. This simple fact struck her as she washed her face and hands. She was free to leave if she wished. The realization brought tears to her eyes, which she quickly blinked away. Crying wouldn't help anything. Lucinda opened her bag, retrieving a clean dress, one of only 2 she owned, and changed quickly. The blue calico was worn at the edges but presentable. She'd need to find work soon. The meager savings she'd managed to hide from Victor would only last a week at most. By the time she ventured downstairs, the afternoon sun was low in the sky. The livery stable smelled of hay, leather, and horses' oddly comforting scents compared to the cloying cologne and whiskey that had permeated her life in Tucson. Griffin was brushing down a chestnut mare, his back to the staircase. The sleeves of his shirt were rolled up, revealing muscular forearms dusted with golden hair. He worked with careful, methodical strokes, murmuring softly to the horse. "Mr. Holt," he turned, setting the brush aside, "you're looking better. I wanted to thank you properly. And to ask about work in town." She stood straight, determined not to appear as desperate as she felt. "I can cook clean, so I kept books for in my previous situation." Griffin's expression gave nothing away. "Graywater's small, not much call for a bookkeeper. I'm not afraid of hard work." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I don't doubt that," he considered for a moment. Mrs. Peterson at the general store mentioned needing help. "Her arthritis makes stocking shelves difficult." He hesitated. "But if you're not ready, there's no rush. You can stay here until you get your bearings." "I can't accept charity." "It's not charity. The room's been empty for years." He returned to brushing the mare. "Besides, Jasper here seems to like you, and he's a better judge of character than most folks in town." The horse nickered softly as if agreeing, making Lucinda smile for the first time in weeks. "I'll speak with Mrs. Peterson tomorrow," she decided. "And I insist on paying rent once I'm earning." Griffin nodded, not arguing. "There's stew left if you're hungry, nothing fancy." "You've mentioned that twice now. Is it a warning?" The question surprised a genuine laugh from him, the sound warm and unexpected. "Maybe my cooking's not winning any prizes. I could cook," she offered, "as partial payment for the room. You don't have to, I want to." The words came out more forcefully than she'd intended. "I need to do something useful." Understanding crossed his face. "All right, kitchen's through there. Help yourself to whatever you find." That evening, Lucinda cooked a proper meal with the simple ingredients she found in Griffin's kitchen biscuits: beans with bacon and fried potatoes. They ate at his small table, the conversation sparse but not uncomfortable. Griffin didn't ask about her bruise or her past, and Lucinda was grateful for his restraint. Later, lying in the narrow bed listening to the occasional sounds from the stable below, Lucinda stared at the ceiling. For the first time in 5 years, she didn't fear what morning would bring. It was a strange feeling, this cautious hope taking root in soil long poisoned by fear. Mrs. Peterson hired Lucinda the next day. The elderly shopkeeper took one look at her bruised face, pursed her lips, and said, 6 days a week, 8 till 6, Sundays off. $1.50 a week to start. There's a room in back for inventory that needs organizing, something fierce." The work was exactly what Lucinda needed: physical enough to exhaust her body and detailed enough to occupy her mind. Mrs. Peterson was brisk but fair, and the customers largely minded their own business. A few curious glances came her way, but in a frontier town like Graywater, people tended to respect privacy. Everyone had a past, most preferred it stayed there. Griffin refused to accept rent for the first week, insisting she save her earnings. They fell into an unexpectedly comfortable routine. Lucinda cooked breakfast and dinner. Griffin tended the livery business. Their conversations grew less guarded as days passed, though they both carefully avoided certain topics. She learned he'd come west from Pennsylvania after the war, where he'd fought for the Union. He'd won the livery in a poker game 5 years ago and had been in Graywater ever since. He didn't drink much, read voraciously from a small collection of books, and preferred horses to most people. Griffin discovered that Lucinda had a quick mind for numbers, a talent for making something from nothing in the kitchen, and a soft spot for the orphaned kitten that had appeared in the stable one morning. They named it Scout, and the tiny orange tabby became a regular presence during their evening meals. 10 days after her arrival, as summer heat settled over the town like a wool blanket, Lucinda's careful new existence shattered like glass. She was arranging a display of fabric bolts in the store window when she saw him, Victor Blackwood's right-hand man, Thomas Reeves, riding slowly down the main street, studying the buildings with cold, calculating eyes. The bolt of calico slipped from her nerveless fingers. Victor had found her. Or would soon enough once Reeves reported back. The safe, quiet life she'd started to build in Graywater was about to end. Mrs. Peterson noticed her distress. "Lucinda, you've gone white as a sheet, girl." "I'm fine," she lied, backing away from the window. "Just felt dizzy for a moment." Take a break, have some water." Lucinda retreated to the back room, her mind racing. She should run again now before Reeves spotted her. But where? She had $8 saved, not nearly enough to get far. And the thought of leaving Graywater, leaving Griffin, created an unexpected ache in her chest. The store bell jingled. Lucinda froze, listening. "Afternoon, Mrs. Peterson." Reeves's oily voice slithered through the door, looking for information about a woman who might have passed through. Blonde, pretty despite her poor choices, might have had some visible injuries. "Don't know anyone like that," Mrs. Peterson replied flatly. "Don't get many strangers here at all." "Her name is Lucinda Miller. She stole from her employer in Tucson, substantial amount." Lucinda bit her lip to keep from crying out. More lies. She'd stolen nothing except herself, property Victor considered rightfully his. "As I said, no strangers here," Mrs. Peterson repeated. "Now, unless you're buying something, I'll keep looking. When you see Mr. Blackwood, you'll understand why honesty would serve you better." The threat in his voice was unmistakable. The bell jingled again as Reeves left. Mrs. Peterson appeared in the doorway, her expression grim. "That man's looking for you." Lucinda nodded, unable to speak past the fear closing her throat. "I figured." The older woman sighed. "You best tell Griffin. He needs to know what's coming." "I should leave," Lucinda whispered. "Victor, Mr. Blackwood, he's dangerous." "So's Griffin Holt when he's riled, Mrs. Peterson said cryptically. "Go on now, store's quiet, we'll talk tomorrow." The walk to the livery stable had never seemed so long. Every shadow, every passing stranger might be Reeves watching. By the time she reached the stable, Lucinda was nearly running. Griffin looked up from repairing a saddle, his smile fading when he saw her expression. "What happened?" The story poured out of her, how she'd come to Tucson as a young widow 5 years ago, desperate for work. How Victor Blackwood, owner of the Silver Spur Saloon, had hired her to keep his books. How the job had gradually changed, with Victor insisting she entertain important customers, then claiming she owed him for her room and board. The subtle control became imprisonment, and when she resisted, the beatings began. "I wasn't the only girl," she said, pacing the stable floor. "But I had access to his accounts, knew his business partners. He wouldn't let me leave." Griffin's face had hardened to granite as she spoke. "How did you get away?" "He was in Phoenix for 3 days on business. I took my chance." She rubbed her eye, the bruise now faded to yellowish green. "This was his parting gift when I told him I wanted to leave. I didn't think he'd come after me. I'm not worth the trouble, but Victor doesn't like losing what he considers his property." "You're not property." Griffin's voice was quiet but intense. "And he's not getting anywhere near you." "You don't understand. Victor has connections, politicians, lawmen, money to hire guns when needed. This isn't Tucson." Griffin stood, crossing to where she'd stopped pacing. "Graywater takes care of its own. I'm not, you are." His eyes held hers. "You are now." Something shifted between them in that moment, a connection that had been building since she'd first awakened in his spare room. Lucinda felt it like physical warmth, a counterpoint to the cold fear Reeves had brought. Griffin continued, "We need to talk to Sheriff Wade. He should know what's coming." The sheriff's office was a small building near the end of the main street. Cole Wade was a weathered man in his 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He listened to Lucinda's story without interruption, only the tightening of his jaw indicating his reaction. "Blackwood," he said when she finished. "Heard the name, nothing good." "His man Reeves is already in town," Griffin added. "Looking for Lucinda." Wade nodded slowly. "We don't have an extradition request or warrant. Miss Miller hasn't broken any laws in my jurisdiction." He studied Lucinda. "You're sure you didn't take anything of his? Money? Papers?" "Nothing but what I earned and what I was wearing." "Then legally, he's got no claim on you, but men like Blackwood don't much care about legal." The sheriff leaned back in his chair. "I can't post a deputy to watch you round the clock." "I'll handle that part," Griffin said. Wade's eyebrow rose slightly. "Figured you might. Just remember, we do things by the law here, Holt. I know your history." Lucinda glanced at Griffin, wondering what history the sheriff meant, but Griffin's expression revealed nothing. "We understand," she said. "Thank you, Sheriff." Outside, the afternoon was waning, the summer heat finally relenting as shadows lengthened across the street. "What did Sheriff Wade mean about your history?" Lucinda asked as they walked back toward the livery. Griffin was silent for several steps. After the war, before I came to Graywater, I rode with a man named Jessup, Marshal Jessup. He was hunting the men who killed his family during the border troubles. You were a bounty hunter, something like that. It wasn't clean work. His voice held regret. I was angry after Gettysburg, lost my brother there. Hunting bad men seemed righteous at the time. The confession surprised her. Quiet, steady Griffin had a past as shadowed as her own. What happened? Jessup crossed a line, killed a man who might have been innocent. I left after that, drifted until I found this place. He shrugged. Wade knows, most folks in town don't. They reached the livery as dusk was falling. Lucinda reached out impulsively, touching Griffin's arm. Thank you for telling me. His hand covered hers briefly. No more secrets between us. Not with what's coming. That night, Griffin moved a cot into the stable instead of sleeping in his room below hers. I'll hear anyone approaching, he explained, checking the shotgun he kept for protection. Lucinda barely slept, listening for hoofbeats that didn't come. By morning, her nerves were raw, but she insisted on going to work as usual. We can't hide, she told Griffin over breakfast. If Victor's coming, he'll find me whether I'm at the store or here. I don't like it, he growled, but didn't argue further. The day passed without incident. So did the next. By the third day, Lucinda began to hope that perhaps Reeves had moved on, decided she wasn't in Graywater after all. On the fourth day, Victor Blackwood rode into town with 6 men, including Reeves. Mrs. Peterson sent the delivery boy running to the livery the moment they arrived. Griffin appeared at the store within minutes, the shotgun conspicuously absent but his Colt revolver visible on his hip. Where are they? He asked tersely. Saloon, Mrs. Peterson replied, asking questions, flashing money around. Griffin's eyes met Lucinda's. Stay here. Both of you lock the door after I leave. Griffin, I'm just going to talk to Wade. His expression softened slightly. We knew this was coming, Lucy. Trust me. It was the first time he'd shortened her name, the intimacy of it making her heart skip despite the danger. She nodded, not trusting her voice. After Griffin left, Mrs. Peterson locked the door and pulled the shade. Been a while since we had this kind of trouble, she remarked, surprisingly calm. Not since the Comanche raid of '68. I'm sorry, Lucinda said miserably. I never meant to bring this to your town. Nonsense. Every place needs shaking up now and then. The older woman patted her hand. Besides, I haven't seen Griffin Holt look at anyone the way he looks at you since he arrived here. Lucinda felt her cheeks warm. He's been kind, that's all. MMHMM. Mrs. Peterson's knowing smile said she didn't believe that for a moment. An hour passed, then 2. The store remained closed, customers occasionally trying the door and moving on. Lucinda's anxiety grew with each passing minute. What was happening? Was Griffin confronting Victor? The thought made her stomach knot with fear. Late afternoon brought the sound of horses outside. Lucinda peered through a gap in the window shade and saw Victor himself dismounting in front of the store, flanked by Reeves and another man. Her blood turned to ice. He's here, she whispered. Mrs. Peterson moved to a cabinet behind the counter, withdrawing a small derringer. Back room, she instructed. Now, I can't let you girl. I was facing down trouble before you were born. Go. The knock on the door came as Lucinda retreated to the storeroom. She heard Mrs. Peterson's firm voice. We're closed for inventory. Open up, madam. Victor's falsely polite tone was achingly familiar to Lucinda. I'm looking for an employee of mine. Blonde woman answers to Lucinda. Nobody here by that name. My associate says he saw her through your window days ago. Your associate is mistaken. Now please leave before I call the sheriff. There was a pause, then the sound of splintering wood as something a boot perhaps struck the door. Mrs. Peterson's outraged cry was followed by heavy footsteps. Search the place, Victor ordered, heart pounding. Lucinda looked frantically around the storeroom. There was a small window, barely large enough to squeeze through, but it was her only chance. She was halfway to it when the storeroom door burst open. There you are, my dear. Victor Blackwood stood in the doorway, elegantly dressed as always, his handsome face wearing the smile that had once charmed her before she knew the cruelty behind it. You've led us on quite a chase. Reeves appeared behind him, smirking. Through the open door, Lucinda could see Mrs. Peterson sitting on the floor holding a handkerchief to a cut on her forehead. "What did you do to her?" Lucinda demanded, anger momentarily overcoming fear. She was uncooperative. Victor stepped into the room. "Time to come home, Lucinda. You've had your adventure." "I'm not going anywhere with you." She backed up until she hit the wall. "This isn't Tucson. You have no authority here." "Authority?" Victor laughed. "I don't need authority, just cooperation, and if you don't want your friends to suffer, you'll provide it." "Touch her again, and it'll be the last thing you do, Blackwood." Griffin stood in the main doorway of the store, Sheriff Wade beside him. Both men had weapons drawn. Victor turned slowly, assessing the new arrivals. "This doesn't concern you, gentlemen." "Miss Miller is my employee, and she absconded with company funds." "That's a lie," Lucinda said firmly. "I took nothing that wasn't mine." "She's been working here," Mrs. Peterson added from the floor. "Honest as the day is long." Wade kept his revolver trained on Reeves. "Mr. Blackwood, you've broken into a place of business and assaulted a citizen of my town. I'm going to have to ask you and your men to leave. Now." Victor's pleasant mask slipped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "Sheriff, I don't think you understand the situation. Miss Miller is coming with me, one way or another. I have influential friends in the territorial government who would be most displeased to hear of your interference. And I have a telegram from the U.S. Marshal's office in Tucson," Wade countered, "inquiring about certain business practices at your establishment. Seems federal agents have taken an interest in your operation, Blackwood." Lucinda saw uncertainty flash across Victor's face. This was news to him and to her. Griffin moved forward, positioning himself between Lucinda and the others. "It's over, Blackwood. Whatever hold you think you have on her is gone." For a tense moment, Lucinda thought Victor might order his men to fight. Then his shoulders relaxed and the charming smile returned. "A misunderstanding, clearly. I apologize for the disruption, Sheriff." He turned to Lucinda. "We'll discuss this another time, my dear, when there are fewer complications." "There won't be another time," Griffin said flatly. "She's not alone anymore." Something dangerous flickered in Victor's eyes before he nodded to his men. "Let's go." Sheriff Wade followed them out, ensuring they mounted up and rode toward the town limits. Griffin immediately went to Lucinda, his hands gentle on her shoulders. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, trembling with reaction now that the immediate danger had passed. "Mrs. Peterson, I'm fine," the older woman insisted as Griffin helped her to a chair. "Just knocked me down is all. Wade's got deputies following them to make sure they leave the county," Griffin explained. "And that telegram was real. Marshal Davis has been building a case against Blackwood for months. Tax evasion, coercion, maybe worse." Hope and disbelief warred in Lucinda's mind. "How did you know to contact the marshal's office?" "I didn't. Wade did after we talked to him. He has connections from his army days." Griffin's thumb brushed a tear from her cheek that she hadn't realized was there. "Blackwood's operation was already under scrutiny. Your information might be what they need to move against him." "He'll come back," she whispered. "He doesn't give up what he considers his. Then we'll be ready." Griffin's voice held absolute certainty. "You're not alone anymore, Lucy. Remember that." That night, despite Wade's assurances that his deputies were patrolling the town's perimeter, Griffin insisted Lucinda stay close. They sat on the small porch attached to the livery's living quarters, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. Scout the kitten purred in Lucinda's lap, oblivious to the day's dangers. "Thank you," she said after a long, comfortable silence. "For everything." Griffin shook his head. "You don't need to thank me, I do." She turned to face him fully. "You took in a stranger, gave me shelter, stood against a dangerous man. Why?" He was quiet for a moment, absently stroking Scout when the kitten moved to his lap. "When you walked into the Rusty Nail that day, something changed." "I can't explain it better than that." His eyes met hers in the lantern light. "I've been alone a long time, by choice mostly. After the war, after Jessup, it seemed safer. And now I realize there are things worth fighting for, worth risking everything for." The simple declaration hung between them, profound in its honesty. Lucinda felt something tight and protected in her chest begin to loosen. "I was married once," she said softly. He died in a mining accident 2 years after we wed. I was 20, alone, nearly destitute. That's why I went to Tucson, why I took the job with Victor." She looked down at her hands. "I promised myself I'd never be dependent on anyone again." "Independence and being alone aren't the same thing," Griffin observed. "You can stand on your own feet and still have someone at your side." The wisdom in his words struck her deeply. Impulsively, she reached for his hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "I'd like that," she whispered. "Someone at my side." Griffin's other hand came up to brush a strand of hair from her face, his touch feather light. "Lucy." Whatever he might have said was lost as his lips found hers in a kiss so gentle it brought tears to her eyes. When they parted, Lucinda rested her forehead against his, something like peace settling over her for the first time in years. "We should get some rest," Griffin said eventually, his voice rougher than usual. "Tomorrow's likely to be busy," she nodded, reluctantly pulling away. "Will you stay close, always?" he promised, and she believed him. The next few weeks passed in a strange combination of tension and joy. Victor Blackwood and his men had indeed left the county, but Lucinda couldn't shake the feeling that the danger had only retreated, not disappeared. At the same time, her relationship with Griffin deepened into something she'd never expected to find again: trust, companionship, and a growing love that both terrified and exhilarated her. They were cautious, mindful of small-town proprieties. Lucinda continued working at the general store and living in Griffin's spare room, but now their evening meals were filled with conversation and laughter. Occasionally, when Mrs. Peterson could spare her, Lucinda helped in the livery, discovering an affinity for horses she hadn't known she possessed. July brought sweltering heat, and the news that federal marshals had raided the Silver Spur Saloon in Tucson, arresting several of Victor's associates. Victor himself had disappeared days before, tipped off by someone within the marshal's office. He could be anywhere, Lucinda fretted when Sheriff Wade brought the news. Or he could be cutting his losses, Wade suggested. Men like Blackwood usually have contingency plans, money hidden away. He might have headed to California or even back east. Griffin was less optimistic. "We'll stay vigilant," was all he said. As summer progressed, Lucinda found herself becoming part of Graywater's community in ways she'd never experienced in Tucson. Mrs. Peterson introduced her to the Ladies' Aid Society. She helped organize a small lending library in a corner of the general store. When the school teacher fell ill, Lucinda even substituted for 3 days, discovering she enjoyed working with children. Through it all, Griffin was her constant, his quiet strength a foundation she increasingly relied upon. Their courtship progressed slowly but steadily, each learning the other's habits and histories. Griffin spoke of his family in Pennsylvania, the brother he'd lost at Gettysburg, his dreams of someday expanding the livery into a proper ranch outside town. Lucinda shared memories of her childhood in Illinois, her brief happy marriage, her hope to perhaps open a small bakery of her own someday. "You should do it," Griffin encouraged one evening as they shared a particularly delicious apple pie she'd baked. "Graywater could use a proper bakery, Mrs. Peterson's bread is like eating rocks," Lucinda laughed. "It would take money to start, equipment, supplies. I have savings," he said casually. "Could be an investment," she shook her head. "I couldn't take your money, not taking, investing." Griffin covered her hand with his. "Partners, remember," the word settled warmly between them. Partners. It encompassed so much more than just business. August brought a telegram from Marshal Davis in Tucson, requesting Lucinda's testimony against Victor Blackwood when he was apprehended. The wire also contained a warning. Informants suggested Blackwood might be headed north, possibly toward the Arizona-Utah border. "He's coming here," Lucinda said flatly after reading the message. "For me," Griffin's jaw tightened. "Then we end this, once and for all." "How?" "Victor's not afraid of the law. He's not afraid of anything. Everyone's afraid of something." Griffin's expression was grim, "and everyone has weaknesses." Sheriff Wade increased patrols around town. Griffin convinced several of his friends, former soldiers and ranchers he trusted, to take shifts watching the trails into Graywater. Lucinda continued her routine, refusing to hide, but now she carried the small derringer Mrs. Peterson had insisted she accept. September arrived with cooler temperatures and the annual Harvest Festival, a tradition in Graywater that drew people from surrounding ranches and settlements. Despite the lingering threat of Victor's return, the town was determined to celebrate. "You should go," Griffin told Lucinda as festival preparations began. "It'll be good for you to enjoy yourself." "Only if you come too," she insisted. In the month since her arrival, Griffin had become more than her protector, he was her future, though neither had spoken the words aloud yet. The festival transformed Graywater's Main Street into a colorful array of booths and banners. Children raced between displays of produce and handicrafts. A makeshift dance floor had been constructed in front of the Rusty Nail, where a trio of musicians played lively tunes. The atmosphere was joyous, a welcome respite from the vigilance of recent weeks. Lucinda wore her best dress, a dark green calico that Mrs. Peterson had helped her make with her hair swept up in a style more elaborate than her usual practical bun. When Griffin offered his arm to escort her from the livery to the festivities, his appreciative gaze made her blush like a schoolgirl. "You look beautiful," he said simply. For a few precious hours, they allowed themselves to forget about Victor Blackwood. They sampled treats from food stalls, applauded the children's recitations, and even joined a Virginia reel, Griffin proving surprisingly light on his feet for a man who spent his days among horses. As dusk approached, lanterns were lit along the street, casting a golden glow over the celebration. Griffin led Lucinda away from the crowds to a quiet spot behind the general store, where a bench sat beneath an old cottonwood tree. "Having fun?" he asked, his hand warm around hers. "More than I can remember," she admitted. "Thank you for making me come. Thank you for making me join you." His smile was tender in the fading light. "There was a time I thought days like this were behind me." Lucinda squeezed his hand. "Because of the war or what came after, both, seeing what men could do to each other, it changes you." His eyes held shadows even now. "Then riding with Jessup, hunting men like animals, I started to believe there wasn't much good left in the world worth fighting for." "What changed your mind?" Griffin's free hand came up to touch her cheek gently. "You walked into the Rusty Nail with nothing but a bag and more courage than most men I've known. Battered but not broken. I was terrified," she confessed. "That's what courage is, being afraid but doing what needs doing anyway." His voice deepened. "Lucy, I need to tell you something." The seriousness in his tone made her heart flutter with anticipation. "What is it?" "I love you." The simple declaration hung between them, profound in its honesty. "I think I started falling the moment I caught you in the saloon. Every day since has just made it clearer." Joy bloomed in Lucinda's chest, so intense it was almost painful. "Griffin," the crack of a gunshot cut off her words. Screams erupted from the main street, followed by more shots. Griffin was on his feet instantly, pulling Lucinda behind the solid trunk of the cottonwood. "Stay here," he ordered, drawing his revolver. "No," she clutched his arm. "It's him, isn't it, Victor?" Another shot rang out, closer this time. Then a voice Lucinda had hoped never to hear again called out, "Lucinda, come out now." Victor Blackwood's command carried clearly through the evening air. The festival music had stopped, replaced by frightened murmurs and the sound of people scrambling for cover. "I know you're here," Victor continued, his voice moving closer. "Every minute you hide, someone else gets hurt." A woman screamed in pain, followed by Victor's cold laugh. "Your choice, Lucinda," Griffin's face hardened. "Wade and the deputies will be moving to surround him. We need to—" "I have to go," Lucinda interrupted, sudden clarity washing over her. "He'll keep hurting people until I show myself." "That's exactly what he wants, I know." She took a deep breath. "But I'm done running, Griffin, done letting him control my life through fear." She touched his face gently. "I love you too, that's what I was going to say. I love you, and I'm not letting Victor Blackwood take another thing from me." Before Griffin could stop her, Lucinda stepped out from behind the tree and walked purposefully toward the main street. Behind her, she heard Griffin's curse, followed by his footsteps as he hurried to catch up. Victor stood in the middle of the dance floor, revolver in hand. Two of his men flanked him while others had taken positions at either end of the street. Near Victor's feet, an elderly woman sat clutching her bleeding arm, her husband kneeling beside her in helpless fury. "There you are, my dear." Victor's smile was as charming and cold as ever. "You've led me on quite a chase." Lucinda stopped at the edge of the dance floor, Griffin a solid presence at her shoulder. "Let these people go, Victor. They have nothing to do with this. On the contrary, they sheltered you, hid you from me." His gaze flickered to Griffin. "Especially this one." "This ends now," Griffin said, his voice deadly calm. "Marshal Davis is already on his way with a federal warrant for your arrest," Victor laughed. "By the time he arrives, we'll be long gone," he gestured with his gun. "Come here, Lucinda." "We're leaving." "No," the single word hung in the air between them. Victor's expression darkened. "No, I'm not going anywhere with you." Lucinda's voice grew stronger with each word. "I'm not your property, I never was." Around the edges of the confrontation, she could see Sheriff Wade and his deputies moving quietly into position. Townsfolk who owned weapons had retrieved them, creating a circle of resistance around Victor and his men. Victor noticed too, his eyes narrowing. "Touching." "The whole town defending the whore." "Watch your mouth," Griffin growled, stepping forward. "Or what?" Victor sneered. "You'll shoot me? Look around, cowboy. My men have this street covered. How many innocent people will die if shooting starts?" It was a standoff, and Victor knew it. Even if Wade's men got all of Victor's gunmen, bystanders would be caught in the crossfire. "There's another way," Lucinda said suddenly, an idea forming. "A way no one else gets hurt." Victor raised an eyebrow. "I'm listening." "You and Griffin, fair fight, just the two of you." She held Victor's gaze steadily. "If Griffin wins, you and your men leave and never come back. If you win—" She swallowed hard. "I'll go with you willingly." "Lucy, no," Griffin protested. Victor considered, his expression calculating. "Interesting proposal. But what's to stop me from shooting him now and taking you anyway?" "Because you're surrounded," Sheriff Wade called from nearby. "First man of yours that fires gets 20 bullets in return." For a long moment, Victor weighed his options, then he holstered his revolver with a flourish. "Very well. A gentleman's duel, though I use that term loosely for your protector." He shrugged out of his expensive jacket, handing it to Reeves. "Fists or guns, cowboy?" "Fists," Griffin decided, removing his own jacket and gun belt. "No weapons." A space cleared in the center of the dance floor. The injured woman was helped away, and the townspeople backed up to form a rough circle around the two men. Lucinda felt sick with fear, but she trusted Griffin's strength and determination. Victor might be cunning, but he'd always relied on others to do his physical violence. "Lucy," Griffin said quietly as he prepared. "If this goes wrong, it won't," she interrupted fiercely. "But whatever happens, I meant what I said. I love you, Griffin Holt." Something in his eyes caught fire at her words. He nodded once, then turned to face Victor Blackwood. The fight began cautiously, both men circling, assessing. Victor struck first, a quick jab that Griffin easily blocked. They exchanged blows, testing defenses. Victor was faster than Lucinda expected, landing a hard hit to Griffin's jaw that rocked him back a step. But Griffin recovered quickly, his military training evident in his disciplined stance. He absorbed another of Victor's punches, then countered with a powerful blow to the ribs that made Victor gasp. The saloon owner's confident smile faltered. What Victor possessed in speed, Griffin more than matched in power and endurance. Years of physical labor had hardened his body, while Victor's softer life in Tucson had left him ill-prepared for a prolonged fight. As minutes passed, Victor's breathing became labored, his attacks more desperate. Griffin pressed his advantage, landing solid blows that gradually wore his opponent down. Victor, realizing he was losing, resorted to dirty tactics, attempting to gouge eyes, striking below the belt. Griffin weathered these assaults with grim determination, responding with methodical, punishing strikes. A solid right hook sent Victor staggering backward. Blood streamed from his nose, his immaculate appearance now ruined. Something had changed in his eyes, the cold calculation replaced by something Lucinda had never seen there before: fear. "Enough," Victor gasped, holding up a hand. You've made your point. Griffin stopped, maintaining his guard. Surrender, you'll leave and never return. Yes, yes. Victor straightened, seemingly accepting defeat. A deal's a deal. But as Griffin began to lower his hands, Victor's hand darted inside his vest, emerging with a small derringer similar to the one Lucinda carried. Griffin, she screamed in warning. Griffin dove to the side as Victor fired, the bullet missing him by inches. Before Victor could aim again, 3 shots rang out simultaneously from Sheriff Wade, from Reeves, and from Lucinda herself, who had drawn her own small pistol the moment she saw Victor reach for his hidden weapon. Victor Blackwood crumpled to the ground, blood blossoming across his chest from multiple wounds. Reeves lowered his smoking gun, his expression one of disgust. Never could fight fair, he muttered, then raised his hands in surrender as deputies surrounded him. We're done here. Blackwood made his choice. In the chaos that followed, Lucinda rushed to Griffin, her heart in her throat until she confirmed he was uninjured. He pulled her close, sheltering her from the sight of Victor's body being covered with a tarp. It's over, he murmured against her hair. Really over this time, she nodded, trembling with reaction. I can't believe Reeves shot him. Loyalty only runs so deep with men like that. Griffin's arms tightened around her. Wade will sort it out. Let's go home. Home. The word held new meaning now, not just a place of safety, but of love. Later that night, after the chaos had been contained and statements given to Sheriff Wade, Lucinda and Griffin sat on their porch, physically exhausted but too emotionally wrought to sleep. Scout curled between them, oblivious to the night's events. You could have been killed, Lucinda said softly, touching the bruise forming on Griffin's jaw, so could you? His hand captured hers, pressing a kiss to her palm. That was a dangerous gamble, challenging Victor to a fight. I knew you'd win. Her faith in him was absolute, did you? A smile touched his lips. I appreciate the confidence. It wasn't just confidence. She met his gaze steadily. I've watched you these past months. Your strength isn't just in your arms, Griffin. It's in your heart, your integrity. Victor never stood a chance against that. Griffin's expression softened. Lucy Miller, you continue to amaze me. Good, she leaned closer. I plan to keep doing that for many years to come. His kiss was gentle despite his split lip, conveying promises that went beyond words. When they parted, Griffin kept her close, his arm around her shoulders as they watched stars peppering the vast western sky. What happens now? She asked eventually. Whatever we want. Griffin's voice held certainty. Marshal Davis will need your testimony about Victor's operation. Reeves and the others will likely make deals to save themselves. As for us. He hesitated, then reached into his pocket, withdrawing something small that caught the lantern light. I've been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment. In his palm lay a simple gold ring with a small pearl set in the center, nothing ostentatious but beautiful in its elegance. It was my mother's, Griffin explained. I sent for it when I knew what you meant to me. His eyes met hers, vulnerable and hopeful. Lucinda Miller, will you marry me? Be my partner in everything for all the days we have. Joy bubbled up inside her, bright and pure. Yes, she whispered, then louder, yes. The ring slipped onto her finger as if it had been made for her. Griffin gathered her close, his kiss deeper this time, full of promise and passion. I love you, he murmured against her lips. And I love you, she answered, marveling at how those words, once unimaginable, now came so easily. They were married 2 weeks later in Graywater's small church, the entire town turning out to celebrate. Mrs. Peterson stood as Lucinda's matron of honor, Sheriff Wade as Griffin's best man. Scout, now considerably larger, attempted to chase the ring-bearer down the aisle, causing laughter that broke any remaining tension from recent events. Marshal Davis arrived from Tucson the day after the wedding, bringing news that Victor Blackwood's criminal empire was being dismantled piece by piece. Reeves and the other surviving members of Victor's gang had indeed made deals, providing evidence that would ensure none of Victor's associates would trouble Lucinda again. With the danger truly past, Lucinda and Griffin began building the life they'd dreamed of during those quiet evening conversations. Using her savings and Griffin's investment, Lucinda opened a small bakery adjacent to the general store. Griffin expanded the livery, adding a blacksmith shop that served the growing needs of ranchers in the area. A year after her arrival in Graywater, almost to the day, Lucinda stood in the doorway of their home above the livery, watching Griffin teach a young boy how to properly brush a horse. The child, 8-year-old Jamie, was an orphan who had arrived in town with a passing wagon train. When no relatives could be found, Lucinda and Griffin had offered him a home without hesitation. "Easy strokes," Griffin instructed patiently. "Jasper likes it gentle, just like this." Jamie nodded seriously, his face intent with concentration as he mimicked Griffin's movements. The old mare nickered contentedly. Seemingly enjoying the attention from her new young friend, Lucinda rested a hand on her swelling belly where their first child was growing. 4 months along now, with the baby due in late winter. Dr. Palmer had pronounced both mother and child healthy at her last examination. Griffin looked up, catching her watching them. His smile still had the power to make her heart race, even after all they'd been through together. "Come join us," he called. "Jamie's getting the hang of it." "I'm doing it right, Ma," Jamie announced proudly, having adopted the title almost immediately after coming to live with them. "You certainly are," Lucinda agreed, making her way carefully down the stairs. Scout, now a full-grown cat, wound around her ankles as she crossed the stable. Griffin's arm slipped around her waist as she reached them, his hand covering hers where it rested on her stomach. "How are you feeling?" "Wonderful." It wasn't just politeness, she truly meant it. Despite the occasional discomfort of pregnancy, Lucinda had never been happier. Later, after Jamie was tucked into bed with a story and promises of riding lessons tomorrow, Lucinda and Griffin sat on their porch as they had so many nights before. The October air held a crisp edge, prompting Griffin to wrap a quilt around her shoulders. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, noticing her contemplative expression. "I was thinking about that day I arrived." Lucinda leaned against his solid warmth. "How close I came to walking past the rusty nail, maybe leaving Graywater entirely. Fate had other plans. Do you believe in fate?" she asked curiously. Griffin considered the question with his usual thoughtfulness. "I believe good people deserve good things. And that sometimes, when we're truly lost, life gives us exactly what we need." His hand found hers beneath the quilt. "You needed safety, I needed you. We saved each other," Lucinda murmured, understanding the truth of it, "and will continue to do so every day." Griffin's kiss was gentle on her forehead. "That's what partners do." As darkness settled fully over Graywater, bringing out a canopy of stars above their small corner of the Arizona territory, Lucinda thought about the journey that had brought her here. From fear to safety, from isolation to belonging, from surviving to truly living. The road had been difficult, sometimes dangerous, but every step had led to this moment secure in the arms of a man who saw her true worth, surrounded by a community that had become family, building a future filled with promise. "Thank you," she whispered, not only to Griffin but to whatever twist of fate or act of courage had led her to stumble into the rusty nail that day in May, bruised but not broken, carrying nothing but a bag and hope for something better. Griffin's arms tightened around her as if he understood all she couldn't find words to express. No more needed to be said. They had found in each other not just safety, but home, the most precious destination of all.